it's Jo from Minerva. Today we're going to do a sew along of the Jayne Pinafore by Bobbins and Buttons. The Jayne Pinafore is a pinafore with buttons and pockets. It has a more work edge to it rather than a casual vibe. A casual one more has top stitching and sort of denim details, but this one you can wear a long sleeve t-shirt, a blouse, a shirt, a pussy bow blouse, a polo neck. You could actually wear this as workwear. You could change the look of this pinafore by using different fabrics. Today I'm using a needle cord because I just love cord, but you could also try a denim, a chambray, you could try a drill, a canvas, anything that's got a little bit of structure. Anything that's too light, and when you wear something underneath, your two items will be fighting. So you need to make sure that your pinafore has more weight than the thing that you wear underneath it. The pattern is for beginners. I'll show you how to make the buttonholes, and I'll also show you how to top stitch the patch pockets. You will need to know how to put facings around a neckline, and I can show you that too. This is the Jayne Pinafore by Bobbins and Buttons. It's got buttons at the top, a facing around the neckline, and two pocket options, a patch pocket and two inseam pockets where you could change fabrics and use two different fabrics. The pattern goes from size 6 to 22, and all the measurements are here for you to check against. Plenty of information on the size chart so you can compare your size to the finished measurements. We're cut out, we can thread our machine with some Gutterman thread, and we're ready to start sewing. I'm going to be working straight through the booklet as if you were. You might have excused me today, the writing is very, very small and I might need to keep popping my glasses on and off. But the first part of the pattern is to add the darts. So you need to mark your darts. I used carbon paper, and then you're going to fold them, sew them from the wide end to the narrow end, and just do a couple of air stitches off the end so that you can tie a knot and not pucker the end of the fabric. And you're going to go forwards and back at the wide end but not at the narrow end. Sew along from wide end to narrow end, a few air stitches, tie it off, and then you're going to press the the seam down, and then you'll get that smooth side seam. You can also use a tailor's ham to make sure that you're getting, you don't put a new crease in there, so that you can keep it really smooth. With cord, it's a good idea to only press it on the back. If you press it on the front, you'll crush the pile of the cord and you'll get sort of funny shiny marks on your cord. So always press cord from the back. So you're going to prepare the pockets by neatening the upper straight raw edge, and then you're going to turn this down by 3 centimetres, and it's quite a chunk, and there's a sort of indicator there with that funny marking, because that's going to go down like that. So you're going to use a seam gauge to measure that, but we're just going to neaten the raw edge, and then I'll show you how to turn that down evenly. These are your pockets. Your pockets are, they're nice when they're like this because they're easy to put your hands in. If you have straight pockets, you can only really drop things in them. You can't actually stand with your hands in your pockets. Okay, it's not massively clear from the instructions. The instructions say turn and press the edge in 3 centimetres, and I didn't know whether to press it to the right side or the wrong side, but actually in the picture it says turn back to the right side. So I've turned this back, so right sides are touching. I'm not going to do anything with this straight seam, straight side of the pocket, because that's going to be within a seam allowance. But this side over here on the curved edge, I'm going to sew that with the seam allowance, which is 1.5, just that little bit, and then I can flip it out. So it should look like this, where you've just sewn that little bit, and I'm going to trim off some of that seam allowance. And take the corner off, because now I'm going to turn it out. The end of your seam gauge is useful for this, because you can get right into that right angle. Now this is going to be the finish, so you need it to be as good as you can get it, and then the rest of that seam allowance will lie down flat, so you should get it so that what's left over stays flat underneath. Try and get it good. If it isn't, then you haven't cut enough off. You might need to just take a little bit more off. I want that to be good. Patch pocket seems such an easy thing to do. It's just a square, you think, but if you don't get it absolutely spot on, that's better. Look at that, that's better. And then you're going to press it back the other way. So you've got the point on one end, you're going to press it back the other way, and then you've got this fold here ready to turn under. Next part of the pocket construction is to deal with this curve. So because we've got a curved hem of a pocket, we don't want to have lots of little puckers and creases in it. So within the seam allowance, you're going to do a little row of easing stitches. You're not going to have a gather in it, it's just enough, in fact it's almost done it itself, look, just enough to draw that corner around, and then you can press it again. So those ease stitches are just, that little ripple there is enough to bring that curve in. You've completed the pocket prep once you've top stitched along here and you've pressed in the seam allowance of the curve, and you'll see that that easing stitch means that it's completely flat around here. You haven't got any puckers. So that's your first pocket done. Now you can prepare the second pocket. the front piece, there will be some notches on the side. I've had to move mine a little bit because I've made my pinafore shorter. I want to make sure that the pocket is in the right place in proportion to the length that I've chosen. So I've moved that a little bit, and I've pinned the pocket to the dress, just making sure that there's no threads hanging out. And then we're going to top stitch that onto the dress. You can go for an edge stitch and take it quite close to the edge. You can do a top stitch, you can put a twin needle in, so you've got a little bit of choice yourself here. Because I've only got one layer of stitching in the top here, then I'm going to stick with one row of stitching all the way around. I'm going to use my foot to help me. So when I'm sewing, I'm going to be lining up part of my sewing foot with the edge of the pocket so that I get an even stitch all the way round. I'm going to use this edge here of the plastic, and I'm going to run that along the edge of this so that I get my edge stitch in an accurate place all the way round. I'm going to go quite slowly round the curve so that I can keep that plastic part of the foot running along the edge of this fabric. At the very point of the pocket, I'm going to do a few forwards and backwards stitches. If I was having if it was a square pocket, then I'd put little triangles at each end. But I'm already at a point there, so I just need it to be reinforced. And so you can see by using the machine foot, I've been able to get a very even stitch around there. If you feel it's a bit too loose, you could go round again, and you could use that stitch line as the guide for where you would channel the next one. But I'm happy with that. It's quite a corduroy. If you go too close to the edge with corduroy, it like flattens the pile a little bit, so I'm really happy with that one. Okay, stage 7, we're going to put the dress pieces. This is the front, this is the back, right sides together along the side seam. And you can finish the side seam first if you want to, or you can finish it afterwards. I'm going to pin this down, and I am going to make a little change here, which you could try if you want to, or you could leave it well alone. I've held this dress up to me, and where I've marked here is my sort of waist, where I'd like it to just come in a little bit more so that it's not quite a pinafore with so much ease. So here, just below the dart, I'm going to just take a little bit out there, just curve it in and curve it back out again. I don't want to affect the dart, I don't want to affect the pocket, I just want a slight gentle curve. So I've kept this bit the same so I don't interfere with the facing. I've kept the dart the same so I don't interfere with the dart. And then I've just curved in, and then I'm going to curve back out again. And then I'm going to repeat that shape on the other side. Obviously you can't take out loads because you've got to get it over your hips to get it on. But I just, for me, because I'm quite small, if I wear something with too much ease, I look a bit drowned in something. So I'm just going to take it in there at the waist. You will need to ease that side seam in. It doesn't go in flat. So what the front is a little bit bigger. So you want to make sure that you get all of that fabric until you get a straight hem and a straight top under the arm. And sew that to 1.5 seam allowance and finish my edges. Next, apply interfacing to your facing pieces if you didn't do that at the cutting stage. And now we're going to sew the side seams together. And we've got to keep that 1.5 seam allowance, and it's important because we want this very complex shape to fit exactly with the shape of the top. So if we don't get this bit right here, then this armhole won't fit, then that will knock out this against the other one, and then this curve won't fit around the neck. So it's really important that you do the 1.5 seam allowance on the facing, and you also repeat that on the side seam. Once you've put the side seams together at 1.5, you then need to neaten off the bottom edge of your facing. You can either turn it over once and sew it with a straight stitch, you can zigzag it, you can put it under the overlocker, it's really up to you. Okay, so this is the dress. I've tried it on. The little take in on the waist has worked really well. I've had a little try on. I've made sure I've pressed the seams open, particularly on a cord, because I don't want to spoil all my careful work of not pressing the right side by at the end having to press everything on the right side. I've introduced the facing unit to the dress, matching up the shapes. It's right sides together. I've put a pin in these sort of main parts, that's where the buttons go. I've put a pin in here where these buttonholes go. And then this is where it was really important to have the right seam allowance. If you've used 1.5 seam allowance on the dress and 1.5 seam allowance on the facing, then you should have the correct distances along the armhole edge. When I first started sewing in my teens, I could never get my facing to match the shape of what I was doing, and it was because I hadn't been very careful about my seam allowances. I just sewed pieces together to join them together, but actually they're all part of the accurate sewing process. So you can see there, I've pinned there, but then that now is exactly the right length. Here's my Jayne Pinafore, all with the facing pinned in, and I've just marked around the curve so that I can make sure that I get the same seam allowance all the way around. Time to sew. Okay, so remove your pins, and then you'll need to trim out the interfaced piece of fabric. So cut that down. So you're going to trim that off like that all the way around, and then clip the curves and the notches. So you'll need to cut out some little slits into the seam allowance there, and here on this concave curve, and here on this convex curve. Takes a little bit of a while, but if you don't, then this is what you will get. You'll have it all puckered like this, and you need to make sure that those curves can stretch out or bend around the fabric. So you'll need one type of cut for concave and one type of cut for convex, depending on whether you need the fabric to stretch or whether you need it to open out, or if you need it to fit inside a smaller hole. If you get to corners, then you can take those off altogether, because that's too much fabric to fit in that right angle. So I'm going to take some of that off. So now I've only got a little bit on that side, a little bit on that side to fit into that corner. Again, it's about getting a good finish on the outside, so if you need to cut a little bit more off, that's fine too. So you can just keep snipping around these curves. If you clip that properly and notch it out properly, then pressing it is an absolute dream. That was really easy to do. I haven't got any puckering around here. So that's the facing attached. The last thing to do is to just attach the facings under the arms. You can do that in two ways. You can put a little hand stitch at the bottom, or you can stitch in the ditch from the right side, if you know how to stitch in the ditch. you can do that, or if not, I can show you now. So on your machine, you pin it to match this seam with the facing seam, and then from the right side you very carefully place the needle foot into the seam allowance, so it should be right in the groove of the seam allowance, and then you're going to sew right in the ditch, and you can feel when the facing ends. And that stops your armhole facing from flapping out. It's also good after you've washed it as well, because that means during washing they don't displace or stretch out. And from the right side, if you've done it carefully, you shouldn't be able to see it. So that's stitched, and your facings attached to the underarm seam. Okay, time to move on to the finishing touches. So I've just tried it on and I've worked out where my buttons need to go. I'm going to use these little wooden ones and then make my buttonholes here. Just marked it with a pin. I'm going to mark it with some chalk, and then the buttons go on the square piece and the buttonhole goes on the rounded piece. And then I can hem it, and then it's time to try it on. Okay, all finished. So I've got little wooden buttons on, and the darts are just coming before the apex. If they go too far around, you sort of flatten it, so you need to make sure that they don't go too far. And the back is nice and flat. I did just take a little bit out of there, which just gave the pinafore a little more shape, so I just took a seam a little bit closer here. It's a really great pinafore. I've made it in cord because I'm working quite casually, but if you wear a pinafore for an office job and you want a pussy bow blouse or a blouse underneath, then you can try it in a suiting fabric. All the products that I've used are listed below. This is a beginner pattern. It is the Jayne Pinafore by Bobbins and Buttons, and there is also a version where you put the pockets in the seam. If you make the Jayne Pinafore, we'd love to see which fabric you've chosen and how you've styled it, so please upload a picture on Minerva. Thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.